All right, everybody. Welcome to the stream. Let's get started. First of all, Terralux PCA, thank you for letting me know there wasn't any audio. I know it might be a little bit confusing if you show up to the stream early and all you've got is a countdown clock and me doing some stuff in the background. I typically stream, so in the past, I used to do some setup before the stream, and then I would kick off the streams by doing upgrades, but that's like a half hour of time. And every stream we would spend a half hour just doing the upgrades. So a while ago, I just started, I'm going to be doing stuff before the stream anyway. So I just started about a half hour before the stream starts. I start sharing my screen, but I don't do any streaming or audio. So that's what was going on at that point in time. But again, thank you for letting me know. Also, everybody else, welcome to the stream. Man, today is going to be a beautiful day. If you're in the US, daylight savings kicked off last night. So we lost an hour. So yeah. Hey, Ole, welcome to the stream, man. I wish they would have done daylight savings on a different weekend. But so they stole an hour from my birthday today. Is what I'm it's what I was going to say. But it is what it is, right? For those of you guys that don't know, you could probably tell from like the gray in my hair and the gray in my beard. I'm 49 today, which is crazy. It's crazy to think I'm 1 year away from half a century, that's really crazy. So that should tell you guys how long I've been doing programming and stuff like that. So that's why I have no shortage of stories, no shortage of opinions or any of that. I've been doing this for so long that I've definitely got my opinions and stuff. So let's get started. Last week, I did an excellent job of sniping myself, as we talked about the security bulletin. With regards to just the SSR stuff. So hey, thanks for wishing me a happy birthday, man. Anyway, so today I wanted to go over just some stuff that came out in 21.2. So the outlet injector for the ng template outlet, you can now inject the outlet into your templates. They made some changes to location strategies to allow you to manage how you want to handle the trailing slash. This one's nice for the height in the image loader config. So you can help control how your page shifts if you're using the optimized loaders in Angular. This one's a really nice change. Yeah, the RFC from Michael is another thing we should take a look at. He shared that with me, and this is an Angular Architects thing. We should definitely take a look at that. That's a good call out, Ole. So we'll take a look at that here soon. The instance of binary operator, the thing is, there's they added some template stuff, right? The exhaustive check for switch blocks allows you to add a special command to your switch blocks and your templates that will have Angular throw an error if you don't hit every case in your switch blocks. They optimize the rendering stuff, which is nice. And they wanted to make sure that, again, they're optimizing the rendering stuff here. support nested component declaration. Um, so this one's a big one. And in the past, um, we had change detection strategy on push, and then we had change detection strategy default. And the reason for this rename from default to eager is default doesn't really communicate what the change detection strategy does. And I really like this change from the Angular team because when we're designing software, part of the developer experience is the cognitive overhead that we create for them, right? Change detection strategy default requires developers to carry more in their head because they have to determine what default means, right? Change detection strategy eager communicates that, hey, we're going to make change detection calls pretty regularly instead of on push, right? That has other settings. I mean, there's still some cognitive overhead for that, but default versus eager communicates better what the change detection strategy does. And then, they're getting ready for TypeScript 6. Skip self. They had a bug with skip self. And then there's a whole bunch of stuff with forms, right? So there's on invalid handling, a form directive, parsing support for native inputs. You can now set the focused field using signal forms, and you can set submit options at form level. There's just a whole bunch of nice stuff here. Better parsing errors for signal forms. If you guys have used signal forms in the past, sometimes the errors can be a little bit crazy. They introduced something that allows reactive forms to work with signal form controls. And this is a big one. This one has caught me a couple of times, and I'm happy to see that now we can bind null to a number input. And in the past, you'll see, like if you go back to some of my streams where we're doing number inputs, you'll see that sometimes I convert number inputs to text inputs, which is not great, just so that we could have null bindings, or, we do some manipulations of the numbers. This is a much better way to handle it. And we can now pass the options as an object. It's going to fix up the parse errors when the model updates. So this will help, if you've got dynamic errors showing up, and just a whole bunch of stuff here. And then, there's some nice changes to can match and is active and things like that. So yeah. So let's take a look at what I missed. It's better to stay with RX method over resource. Also, Michael broke LinkedIn today. How did you break LinkedIn, Michael? Until resource is stable. Yes, but with all this error problem, some hacks with snapshot, this is all just working with normal EX method approach. Mutations, no problems with that. There's a PR for handling numbers with text related inputs, and they lay out some reasons why that may be normal once better support for the PR is merged. And that, that's fair. Yeah, so resources doesn't have callbacks like mutations do. And so Michael and Ola are talking about the Angular architect stuff. So let's go ahead and close this. And so this is the RFC opened by Michael Small. He's here in chat if you guys have questions for him. He's been doing some amazing things with the Angular architects team, and just really doing some amazing things in the Angular community. He's been a good friend of just the stream itself, and a good friend to me personally. Michael's a great guy. Definitely one of the we're happy to have him in the Angular community, right? As someone who can personally speak for the entire Angular community, I can't. I don't speak for the entire Angular community, but definitely somebody that I'm happy to have in the Angular community, and he's doing some great stuff. If you guys don't know what NGRX Toolkit is, NGRX Toolkit is put together by the Angular Architects team, and it adds some nice stuff to NGRX. It adds some really good stuff to SignalStore. And so Michael's put together this RFC talking about resource snapshots and with resource. So you can see that you can create new resources from snapshots using resources from snapshot. And this is actually part of the Angular. So there's an Angular this is part of the Angular API. So you can give a resource snapshot. That resource snapshot is going to allow you to compose resources from snapshots of resources. So, you can compose signal APIs like computed linked signal to transform resource behavior, right? And this goes through a whole bunch of information about this. Michael's created a stack blitz on it, and he goes through a whole bunch of stuff, and he's got examples from the documentations. But then he goes through the issues that the Angular Architects team has identified for limitations on snapshot composition. And I highly recommend that you guys go through and read this. But the RFC, they're asking for people to participate in this discussion. No problem, man. You guys do amazing stuff for us. The Angular Architects are good friends. Michael is a good friend. I really appreciate you guys thinking about this stuff at a higher level. So for sure, if you guys are into modern Angular, if you guys are into resources, if you guys want to help the Angular Architects team, go check out this. Go check out this RFC. They're proposing some good fixes, right? So with resource is an API from the NGRX toolkit, and they're proposing some changes from the with resource, right? They're proposing with previous value, and they just want some feedback on how do we fix this, right? How do we handle the resource issues and things like that? So definitely worth giving a read through, definitely worth putting some thought into, and please provide feedback. The more people that we get providing feedback, the better the solution will be. So I will be providing feedback. I definitely need some time to think about it and think about what I think would be a good direction to go. But I like the thought that's gone into this, and it's actually helped me understand what the snapshot stuff does, and it's helped me understand better what the issue is, which I really appreciate from this RFC. If nothing else, reading through this RFC will help you understand better what's coming from resources from Angular. So highly recommended. NGRX Toolkit is one of the things that makes Angular better than React. Man, that would be me stepping into a landmine. I like where your head is, Ola, but that's definitely a dangerous place for me to comment. I do have a lot of friends who have moved from Angular to React or Angular to Vue, and those are interesting choices in my in my opinion. But as I talk to them, they've got good reasons for doing it. I also know people coming from React to Angular and from Vue to Angular. So, all the tools seem to serve good purposes where they where they exist at the current time. Let's put it that way. But in the future, I think we'll be able to, um, uh, you know, there was a Minko had the presentation that all of the big libraries and frameworks are generally solving the same problems. And they're becoming more and more alike, and I tend to agree with that position. Yeah, they didn't have SignalStore and NGRX toolkit before. Fair enough, right? So there's some really good stuff there. Mutations is another big piece, and this is so here's the interesting thing. Most of the coding that I do anymore, most of the code writing that I do anymore is either for this stream or for personal projects. A lot of what I do at work right now is very high level thinking, strategy type thinking. So one of the places where I really wish I was better was with these mutations. And I think we're going to take a look at these mutations specifically today. And the reason that we want to take a look at mutations is there are some interesting things we can do with the mutations, with success and error handling and things like that. Maybe we should do that. Maybe we should do that today. Because the nice thing about mutations is they've got a success method, they've got a error method, they've also got the ability to parse the response itself so you can give back a better response. So they're like a better way of handling, they're all of this stuff here that you see in the save to server. This stuff would all be things that you do when you make calls, right? So here we can see the calc sum. So let's take a look at the issue that we need to solve today. And then I've got Ole and Michael here to help me with mutations. Guess what, guys? You're on the spot today. But it'll be good for me to learn mutations, but it will also be good for everybody else to understand kind of what mutations do for us. There's the notion of like an RX mutation, which uses an RxJS stream, an HTTP mutation. I believe there's a signal mutation. Is there a signal mutation? But I think we'll be using RX mutations today, and we'll take a look at it. So there's an on success, on error, and then there's this notion of flattening. So like we can use like merge op is basically a merge map. Concat op is a concat map, exhaust map, merge map, and switch map, right? And there might be reasons for us to do that. Actually, we know there will be. But we've got all of this stuff in here. And let's take a look at what we're trying to solve. And then we'll get into that. So if you have some service that returns an observable, you need to use Rx mutation. In other cases, just use HTTP mutations. They are somewhat signal agnostic. Just use HTTP mutation and Rx mutation. They're somewhat signal agnostic in a sense, as they mostly service your store, patching, and side effect needs. Perfect. So we don't have a signal mutation. There's an Rx mutation, which we'll be using because our service returns RxJS observables. So we'll be using an Rx mutation. The last time we wrote code, so last week we talked a lot about like interviewing and stuff, right? So last time we did a toggle with toggle the sort detection direction and filtering out has feathers. So there are two methods that Gemini is suggesting we use RX method for: get table dynos and delete dyno. And you know what? Let's go ahead. We'll worry about. We're going to switch over to Claude Opus today. What I need to do is I need to look at my tokens and stuff and figure out what I need to be paying for and what I don't. I'm paying for a couple of LLMs that I probably need to cancel. I'm really debating canceling my ChatGPT, but my family uses that one quite a bit. And switching over to like Claude. Just pass URL and HTTP mutation. The reason I probably don't need the service, and we'll take a look at this, right? If we take a look at DynoCrudStore here, we've got this delete dyno where we're pulling the ID off, we're filtering it out, but we've got this service already existing that calls delete dyno. Delete dyno is a GraphQL mutation. So we probably can't do the URL in an HTTP mutation, right? Once we get rid of all of the graph in this project, and that's so you guys know, there are two big streams that I want to do. Right now, I want to finish converting this this application over to Signal Forms, and then behind the scenes, I'm going to finish up upgrading everything. And then if something interesting happens during the upgrades, then I'll probably stream the interesting thing that happened. But as you guys saw before the stream, you know, if we do an NCU format group, there's a whole bunch of stuff that needs to be upgraded. Like all the Apollo stuff is way out of date. GraphQL, all of my Nest stuff is way out of date. Prisma's out of date. Like all of this stuff is way out of date. And I could probably spend a month's worth of streaming just fixing this up. Once we get everything to Signal Forms and we can prove it works, then I'm just going to do all of this fix up behind the scenes so that the repository is the most up to date that it can be. So that's what we're looking at here. So until we do that, and until we get rid of GraphQL, then we're kind of in a weird situation. So the next, that's weird. Somebody just showed up. They parked in front of my house, and I don't know what they're doing. I'll worry about it later. I've got cameras. Use Drizzle. Maybe I could use Drizzle. That might be a way to get around it. But until we're to that point, I don't want to spend a lot of time worrying about the backend. So we're just going to use this Dynos CRUD service. It returns an observable. It uses Suspensify, which is why we're having to do this tap of a response and things like that. And so I'm very, very curious. If we take this delete dyno and we move it into the CRUD store, how would it do that? And so, like, one of the things I'm curious about is if we chat with this, right? And I just say, let's move this into the dynos crud store.ts, and let's use mutations from the NGRX toolkit. I'm just curious what Claude is going to come up with if we do this. web devs be like, use Grunkle or use Dingus SFTP. you're, you're not wrong. Like there are so many ORMs, there are so many things out there, and there are some amazing ORMs. Like I don't want to talk down to ORMs because we're using like Prisma ORM, right, to do a lot of stuff for us in our Nest.js. So I don't want to talk down to ORMs or things like that. What I'm trying to do is just avoid getting distracted. And I want to get everything into a SignalStore so that we can then turn around. We're going to allow for this conversation. But yeah, I'm with you, Michael. Like Grunkle and Dingus and Binkle Drink and right. It there are a lot of terms and terminology to know, and like our industry in particular is plagued with a lot of lingo. And the crazy thing about the lingo is that we often steal older lingo. And why is it telling me with mutations? Rx mutations API isn't included in the install 21.0.1 of. Yeah, it is. I'm really curious. Like Claude just got stuck. Like it's telling me, hey, the NGRX toolkit doesn't have with mutations. It doesn't have, and maybe, um, um, this is hilarious. So it's getting stuck because I probably used the wrong term here. No, it's with mutations. So it's definitely there. It just it's just stuck. Okay. But now that I have all the context I need, let me write the implementation plan. We don't need an implementation plan. I'm just going to cancel this. What a mess is what I'm going to say. I don't want an implementation plan. I want to keep this implementation around. So we're just going to do it ourselves. So let's copy this over. Let's go over to our with CRUD store. And here we're going to add our with mutations, which obviously is there. And we're going to push in our state. So now we've got our mutations. The other thing I want to do is I just want to paste in the code that we copied. So we got our delete dyno. So we know from talking with, well, this is wrong, right? So this suggestion here is wrong, and we can tell it's wrong because if we go take a look at our mutations, we want an Rx method. So if we take a look up here, Rx mutation, we want an Rx mutation. And our Rx mutation has an operation on it. So we're going to add that operation. So if we take a look, right, it's the name that we want. So this will be our delete dyno. It'll be an RX mutation, and then we're going to pass in a configuration object. That's the way it works. Same with HTTP mutation. So here, we're going to add our delete dyno. And this is going to be an RX mutation. And RX mutation, we need to import this. So we've got that. So if we take a look again, so the with mutations includes the store. RX mutation, we've got an operation. We can pass in something that returns our mutation, right? There are other things that we can do, like we can parse the response. We're actually going to be using the parse method here, so that we parse the response as it comes back. So the operation includes the params, which we need. Then we've got a success and error callback, our flattening operators, which we're probably going to use because we probably want a switch map if somebody hits the button a bunch of times, or an exhaust map. So probably an exhaust op is what we'll be using here. And I don't know, let's keep digging into it, right? So our RX mutation needs an object. Our object needs an operation. Our operation is going to be, so if we look at our dyno ID, when we call delete dyno, we're getting a base dinosaur. And so we aren't getting an ID here. So this will be our dyno, and this is going to be a base dinosaur, right? We're going to need to add that import in. And so now we've got an operation. Void is not assignable to type operation, right? So we're going to need to return some stuff here. When we get the delete dyno, we're grabbing the ID from the dyno. So we could actually, instead of doing this, we can grab the ID from the dinosaur. And we can make this our dyno ID. And actually, I've got it backwards. So let's go dyno ID. Is that not right? Oh no, I had it right the other way around. So we're going to parse out the ID from the base dyno, but we're going to rename it to dyno ID. And now it's telling me probably that I'm not using it. Yeah, dyno ID is declared, but its value is never read. The thing here is we need to filter out if it's a string. So the with mutations, because I want, well, so filter is going to, what we can do is the isString method that we were using, is it here? Where is isString? So isString is a function here. So we can bring this across to That's weird. Is string, that's interesting. That doesn't actually make it a string, but we'll fix it. So we're going to add this function is string. It's going to be a string unknown or null. And what we can return is type of value equals string, and value does not equal null. So that guarantees that it's a string. And then here we can say if not a string dyno ID, it's saying to return here. So we'll do that. And then we need to handle for, so we've handled the map where we pulled out the dyno ID. We've handled the filter, it being a string. We're using a concat map on the dyno here. So that means that we can use the operator. No. Operator. And here we want concat op. So we were using the concat map to do the delete dyno, which is great. And then here we need to handle some stuff in the parse. So at this point, now we can just return this.CRUD service .delete dyno. We need to inject the CRUD service. We don't have a this also. So inside of this operation, I believe we can just say, hey, no. Yeah, so we've got our inject here. It's going to inject our CRUD service. So now what do we get? Our operation. So this return right here, we can just bring in empty. And that's going to fix our issue. So we weren't returning an observable, and so the operation was saying, hey, you're either giving us an undefined or an observable, and the operation needs an observable. So at this point, we're to where we need to handle this tap. And this tap is taking the suspense response and handling that, right? So if we take a look here, methods with mutations. So we've got a status. A value is pending a success error and has value. That's what we get back on the signal, the mutation signal. But I want to take a look at I want to take a look at parse. So parse takes a response and returns it as a counter response here. Very, very simple parser, but I want to see. Let's experiment with the parse, right? So here, parse, and we want a response object. And let's see what we get from this. So our response, so parse does not exist in Rx mutation. So parse only exists in so Rx mutation can only use operation success or error. HTTP mutation can have request success error. Where was the parse here? I saw parse, right? Operation success error request. There's parse. I guess that makes sense that you would want parse on HTTP mutation. Here, parse doesn't make sense, but what we can do is this, maybe? Yeah, HTTP mutation doesn't know. That makes sense. But what we can do is we can just pipe this. And here, let's make this tap response instead, because that comes from Is there not the tap response from NGRX? Have I not added that? Let's take a look. NGRX IO. And in version 21, with our operators, and maybe I don't have the operators installed. That might be the issue that we've got here. Because NGRX operators have concat latest from, tap response, and map response and things like that. Oh, you know what? This is a problem. Yeah, you're right, Michael. Let's add the NGRX operators package. So we're gonna go pnpm install at ngrx/operators. Well, we have a problem here with the delete dynos, because oh, that's interesting. But we can fix this, right? as soon as we get our tap response. Yeah, you're on success and on error. The problem I have, and maybe Suspensify is the problem here. So let's go take a look at Suspensify. So in our JS Cutlery operators, we're using Suspensify from there. And actually, let's go to the GitHub page. So we've got JS Cutlery operators, and then we've got our Suspensify. So the reason we were using Suspensify is it handles pending, error, success, and finalized. And so Suspensify, you add this. So we probably don't need Suspensify anymore. Yeah, so operator merge op, concat op is the default if operator is omitted. That's good to know. I could probably get rid of Suspensify. Let's be honest. That's going to fix a lot of this issue here. So let's get rid of Suspensify. So there's that. So concat op is the default, so we'll take that out also, which means we can take it out of here. So what we can do is we can go to delete dyno. And the reason we added Suspensify was because we so here we can just take out the suspense piece. That's going to mess up our Dyno's CRUD service here. But we're going to be removing that anyway. So the issue we were having is that, and the reason we added Suspensify is Suspensify, if we take a look at it, the point of Suspensify is to handle the, it gives us like the pending and all of that stuff, right? It also handles errors and all of those fun things like that too. We get that with our mutations. So with mutations, basically gives us the Suspensify. So here, now we can say we've got our on success. And let's just grab our response here. For right now, we're just going to console.log our response. And instead of being kind of so generic, we're going to call it our delete dyno success response, right? And then the piece here that we need to add in is the state.get table dynos. So we need to add that piece in a bit. The other piece is the on error piece. In the on error, we're going to grab the error. And right now we're console logging delete dyno error. Here down below, we can see that we added the console.error. So we're going to do the same, console.error, right? And then we're going to do error deleting dyno. So there we go. So that handles all of this stuff. And so the last piece that we need is the piece that handles the we need the piece that handles the get table dynos, right? And get table dynos had a couple of pieces in it that we need to add. But for right now, we're just going to grab this piece, and then we'll worry about the extra pieces, right? So we don't need the has value anymore, which is good. But to get this to work, we need to build up. So we need with mutations again. Here we're going to have our state. And so now we need oh, now that's interesting. Instead of doing it that way, we're going to do it this way. And we don't need delete dyno. Instead, we're going to add our get table dynos. So here we're going to do the same, right? Get table dynos. And this is an RX mutation. So let's see what we get right now. So with it as it stands, there's a couple of things, right? So like the effect allows us to get a callable thing, and we can actually now uncomment this because get table dynos. Why doesn't it like this? Oh, it returns expected 1 argument but got 0. Why is it expecting 1 argument here? It's got params any. Where am I getting my params? So my operation. So here, it's defaulting to any params. Is there a way to make my operation a void? Do you know, Michael, if there's a way for me to make this function not have params any, so that this will work, so that I can call it without params? Because if we look at the Dynos CRUD service here, get dynos was an observable void, so it could be called without any params. So we're using a switch map on this one. So here we can say our operator is a switch op. So that one works. Okay, so we just use an unused parameter and call it void. Perfect. Perfect. That works. So it's getting hit by the ESLint no unused variables. We could clean that up. But for right now, we're just getting this over, right? So we've got the CRUD service, we're injecting that, we're getting the sort direction, and then the has feathers filter is not. So it needs to be bool has feathers filter here. So if we just do bool has feathers filter, bool has feathers filter, that's going to fix that piece. So now we've got our operation that's handling this. On success, we're logging the response. On error, we're logging the error. See, we're missing the piece here. So this piece in the success. So for right now, we're just logging it. We'll get this piece in. Actually, we can just do it. So the type of response here is a base dinosaur array. We actually want to remove from our Dinos CRUD service, from our get dino, we just want to remove the suspensify here. And this is just going to be a suspense of dinosaur, or an observable of dinosaur. And that means this one also needs to change. And our get dinos table also needs to change, which means we can remove the suspensify here. And that should, I mean, that's made a mess of, right? Like all of this stuff, it's made a mess of this function, or of this component store, but that's okay. We're going to be removing this component store as soon as we get everything in place. So at this point, the type of response is now all dinosaurs. So our response has all dinosaurs in it. We're pulling that out. So here in our success, well, we'll log the whole response for now. We'll clean this up after we make sure it works. But at this point, what we can say is we can say const all dinosaurs, and we're going to actually make this dino. And now we can pull that. And there's our patch state. So our patch state is doing the same thing here as we were doing up there. So our success is patching the state. We're using a switch map operator. We're handling all of this. So the last piece that we we need to handle. So this is working whenever somebody calls get dynos, right? Like get table dynos. But it also has two other pieces that are being called, the sort direction and the feathers filter. So if either of those change, then we also need to call get table dynos. And the best way to do that is through an init, right? Everything else here, switch map, we're calling that, we're tapping and handling all of that. We took out suspensify because we don't need it. Operation for Rx mutation. Did I do something wrong? That operation for Rx mutation. Am I doing something? I think for get we should use with resource. You know what? You're 100% correct, Ole. Way to call that one out. This is not really a mutation. A mutation. So excellent call out. I'm just stuck in mutation mode, right? Ole and Michael are thinking deeper about this, right? Mutations are for when we talk about mutations, there's a couple of mutations in computer science that we'll talk about, right? There's mutations that happen to objects, right? And that's the mutation we typically think about when we think about front end code. Is right, we're mutating some object. That's not the mutation that we're talking about here with mutations. These mutations are more closely related to like the GraphQL mutations, where we're mutating something on the server. We're making a change on the server. Oh, I copied the void art. Okay, yeah, Ole, that's a good call out. I don't know how that got past me, but no, this is a really good call out, and this is why I appreciate people. I appreciate people, asking questions, providing comments, and stuff like that, because to Michael's point and my point, we're highly focused on the mutation, right? We weren't thinking bigger picture here. Mutations are like GraphQL mutations where we're actually making a change on the server. So think things like update, like when we talk about CRUD, right? Mutations are the C create, right? The U update and the D delete. Those are mutations. The read of CRUD is not a mutation. Oh, I learned this all from you guys. Well, thank you for being modest here, but this is a good call out, right? We should be using a resource for our HTTP GET. And the reason we want to use a resource is we could use an RX method, and that would be perfectly fine, right? An RX method would be perfectly fine. But as you noticed, we're slowly taking the suspensify out. And that's the benefit of what Angular is doing with resources, what the NGRX toolkit is doing with mutations, is suspensify is a very good library because it gives us the signals for when something's loading. It also handles errors. It handles a whole bunch of stuff for us. And it prevents our application from breaking. So like in the past, if you're a happy path developer, which a large portion of us are, I like to be a happy path developer, right? I often forget error handling. And forgotten error handling shows up as broken user experiences, right? So if you forget an error handler, your user experience breaks because you you throw a runtime error that you're not handling an error from the server or who knows what, right? Um, Resources and mutations allow that to be much more safe. Um, Personally, if I were hand migrating from ComponentStore to SignalStore, I would pull Rx method usage from the ComponentStore to with methods, then tag them to be converted to with resources after to be 1-to-1. Yeah, you're probably right there. I don't want to put the suspensify back. That's really where I am. So if we look at with resource provides a value, a status, an error is loading, has value, and a way to reload the resource, right? This one, man, because we don't really have an HTTP resource right now. So we could go, hmm. I'm trying to figure out. You mostly use Rx resource. Yeah, I think I'm going to use an Rx resource here too instead of an HTTP resource. So the nice thing about resources is that there's a function and we can give it, so the first part of the function, so what we really want here is we want a with resource, right? And our resource here is going to take the state. And here, can we do this mostly? So can I just take this get table dinos here? Let's take out this with mutation. And so this doesn't work. We want an Rx resource here. So the Rx resource fixes that up. Get table dinos is a resource ref. So now when we take a look at with resource, So that's the state, and then these are the functions here, and then we've got our resources here. So we've got our RX resource. Our RX resource doesn't have an operation on it, right? It's just a function that returns the resource value. I think I need to go take a look at RX resource options. Yeah, I think that's where we need to be. Um, so the RX resource options has the stream. You can override the params. You can override the default value and the injector. So the stream is what we're looking at, right? So we've got the base resource, and we need to return an observable here. So instead of operation, this becomes stream. Is that not right? I actually think, so if we take a look, this resource is going to provide the dinosaurs here. Um, but my stream overload, no overload matches this call. The expected type comes from property string, which is declared here on type this. I'm missing something with my stream. Let's go back here. So stream is params. These are the params that we use, I believe. Yeah, this is not. Yeah, you'll alternate. Welcome to the stream, by the way, you'll alternate. It's good to have you here. Um, I actually, so if we take a like this get table dinos isn't giving us a function that we can call. What it actually does is it creates right, it creates a get table dinos resource that has all dinosaurs on it. This isn't really what we want. I actually think the mutation was the right way to go here. And I'll give you my reasoning for that. So the resource gives us a resource that would add stuff to the it would add stuff to the state. I think resource is ultimately the right way to go, but we're not in a place where we can go. Yeah. Yeah, that's right, Michael. But so when we probably the better way to look at this, and why I'm saying what I'm saying right now is let's get a new canvas here, right? And let's take a look at. So this is our store, right? And let's put that at the top. So this is our store. Inside of our store, we add these things. Come on. How did I get that dot there? It doesn't matter. So inside of our store, we add, this is our state, right? This is our with state. And our with state has a certain shape. You know, and then we've got like our with methods and stuff, but they don't add stuff to the store. If we do a with resource here, then the resource that we're adding adds to the shape of the state, right? Like these two combine together. And whoops, when we do a with mutation, right? What we're doing is we're adding functions that allow us to mutate this state, right? And so in the with resource, what we would do is we're basically adding things that are going to watch certain parameters, and when those parameters change, then the resource is going to fire and get the data. With resource is probably, well, it isn't even probably. With resource is the right way to go. The problem is our code isn't in a state where we can go to with resource right now. So with mutation is going to allow us to keep the fewest amount of changes to our current code. So it's kind of that intermediate step, right? If we think about like refactoring, and that's not what I wanted. Let's grab, where's the pencil? And if we think about refactoring as like, this is where we start, right? And this is a step, like we want to finish somewhere up here, but along the way, we're going to create steps that get us there, right? And so the first step might be, you know, refactor some code. The second step might be remove some code. The third step might be refactor again, right? The fourth step might be remove more code. And each step gets you closer and closer to where you want to be. This mutation is this step, right? Our with resource is probably this step along the way, but we need to take this step to make sure that everything works with the fewest changes possible, because we don't want to introduce a ton of variables into our refactor. Once this refactor works, then we can start taking a look at with resource and see what that means, right? Yeah, so if you don't need excess params in the state, can't you just map with the response? Yeah, we probably could, right? The issue is the restructuring of the state. If you don't need an intermediate fetch data, then I would just switch map that and then map the final shape. That's not a bad call either. I argue with myself all the time about this. What should I do? Should I go with the ideal solution or the time optimal one? And alternate, that is like probably one of the best questions we can ask ourselves as engineers and even as engineering leadership, right? What is the right call here? Should we go straight to step 3, skipping a bunch of steps, or should we go here? There are a lot of thoughts that can go into this, right? Like, what is the risk of skipping steps, right? Even like with like climbing steps in a building. Most people will skip one step, right? A lot of people will skip one step and go up steps faster. People who skip 2 steps, well, you run the risk of tripping, right, and falling on your face, right? There's real risk there as you skip more and more steps. So that's one of the big considerations is, what is the risk of me going here and then here and then here, right? So that's one consideration, and maybe we'll write this stuff down, right? Like, what is the risk of skipping steps, right? That should be one of your first thoughts, is like, what is the risk of skipping steps? If there's 0 risk of me going to here versus here, then obviously taking this step is, well, not obviously, but most likely taking this step is a bad choice, right? If I can skip these 2 steps and introduce almost no risk, then these 2 steps are most likely just an expense, right? And we can get rid of them and we can just go straight to here. However, in this case where we're looking at things, the risk that we're introducing by going straight to with resource is there's a whole bunch of changes to the code. There's changes to the way the store works. There's potentially changes to a bunch of other things, right? We're already introducing risks by going to with mutation because we're taking out Suspensify. And then we're taking out the component store, right? There's already some risk here. And then adding increased risk puts us maybe in a worse place, right? Again, these are decisions that you need to make as you're going through this. Then the next step is, what is the cost of skipping versus not skipping, right? And this is an important piece of the puzzle, because let's say, we're going to argue round numbers here, right? Let's say that going here and doing this, let's say this is like $50,000. Let's say going here and doing this is another $50,000, right? That's $100,000 just to get to this step. Let's say that if we do that, then the cost of this step is another $50,000. So $150,000 overall, right? To get past the third step. Now let's turn around and let's say, well, we can get to this step for $75,000, right? If we skip the bottom 2 steps, and we go straight here. We estimate this is a 75, or we could even say $100,000 cost, right? But we're saving a third of the cost to go straight here, right? So we've introduced more risk, but maybe we're saving, $50,000, right? Just using random numbers. Well, that makes this discussion about skipping the step more interesting, right? So the risk and the cost are two things, right? You may also be looking at things like, what are my team's skills, right? Is the new solution, well, we're not going to say it's better, but we can say, is the new solution the final solution, right? Right, so we're looking at risk, cost, skills. Are we closer to the final solution, or are we at the final solution, right? All of these things play into it, and that's where I think you'll alternate hey, Abradores, it's good to see you, man. I'm doing well today. It's a sunny day. It's a beautiful day. My only complaint is that they stole an hour from my birthday today with this stupid daylight saving stuff. But other than that, we're good. Right, exactly, you alternate, right? So like the benefits of skipping, right? When we talk about I'll add that here, right? Are there benefits to skipping, right? All of these things come into play when we're designing software. And these are the kinds of questions that that get you into leadership positions. Because as you're having discussions, if you can have coherent answers for these discussions, and if you can present these discussions to the business and to engineering leadership and to, right, you are a much more valuable employee because you're giving information. Like, ultimately, skipping steps is probably not a business decision, right? This is most likely an engineering decision. The business decision is, the business decision is we need this feature. The engineering decision is how do we get to that feature, right? And if the cost of that feature is too much, then the engineering side of things is to inform business, hey, this is the cost of doing what you want to do. These are the potential workarounds and things like that. And then business can make a decision, yeah, we want to do workarounds. We aren't going to deliver the original feature. We're going to deliver something else while we worked getting what we wanted originally, right? Those are business decisions. Engineering decisions are really these steps where, do we take this step, do we take this step, or do we just take one giant step? And that's where understanding, right, communicating, hey, the risk of going from here straight to here is really more than we should probably take on. Or there's almost no risk in going from here to here and things like that. Abradores, I might have an Angular interview, funnily enough, next week. Any tips and tricks? What position, like, is this junior, senior, mid-level? Like, what level are you looking for? Like, I have an idea of where you are as a developer. I don't know what level the position is for. Tips and tricks, man. I have no idea. They didn't tell me anything about the position, only that it is Angular. Okay. In that case, some tips I would give you. Um, understand some of the Angular terminology around what has become modern Angular. So understanding what the Angular Renaissance might mean, and even um, understanding how to speak about that, right? When you're talking about the Angular Renaissance, you're talking about anything Angular 15 plus. You're talking about signals. You're talking about moduleless. You're probably talking about zoneless. You're talking about um, you're talking about resources, which is stuff we're talking about here, right? Like any of the modern Angular 15 plus stuff, which is crazy to say because, we're at Angular 21 looking at Angular 22. Um, so that's an important piece to understand, is the technology that comes along with that, right? Signals is going to be important. The other piece that you're going to want to understand is in Angular, we talk about the coarseness and the granularity of reactivity right now. And you're going to get questions around RxJS versus signals in modern Angular. And understanding which is where and why is an important piece of that, right? When we talk about fine-grained versus coarse-grained reactivity, we're really talking about RxJS being the more coarse-grained versus signals being the more fine-grained. The other thing to that is a lot of times people will try to get you with gotchas around change detection and signals. Signals don't provide any significant change detection benefits yet. Once we get to like signal components and signal store forms and things like that, then there will definitely be benefits there. But to get the benefits of signal-based change detection, the more fine-grained change detection instead of coarse-grained change detection, you need to be using on-push. You need to be going zoneless and things like that, and that enables better fine-grained control. So understanding that, when we're talking about coarse-grained versus fine-grained reactivity, what do we mean? Well, with RxJS, there are special, basically anytime an RxJS observable emits, it's going to trigger the entire upgrade tree, right? The entire DOM tree to, and this is very, very generic, right? There are ways to optimize this. There are other considerations to take into account, but from a very, very generic point of view, the reason we call RxJS coarse grain is when RxJS emits, the change detection cycle is typically for the entire tree. When we talk about fine-grained reactivity with signals, there are ways to limit the updates to the tree using signals. But for current Angular, you need on push. You probably need zoneless, right? There are ways to get fine-grained reactivity with RxJS. And looking at things like the stuff that like Michael Hadke's done with RX Angular, you can be very, very fine-grained and do some incredible stuff with RxJS, with RX Angular. So obviously there are exceptions to what I'm saying, but in general, when we talk about coarse-grained versus fine-grained reactivity, we're talking about RxJS. Everything updates when the observable emits, versus signals very fine-grained, where there's better control over what updates based on signals, things like that. Angular for sure is not an easy tech these days, not going to lie. A lot of BS going into modern Angular. It feels like it is getting more complicated than other stuff. Funny enough, I studied a bit of Java, Spring, and Angular too, and I worked with Angular, but it feels so much harder to bullshit my way in an interview with Angular rather than Spring. And that's fair. right? Like modern Angular is more about building modern reactivity. Um, and that's really what when you look at the Angular Renaissance, Angular is modernizing the way reactivity works in applications. And we're getting closer and closer to streaming type stuff, like, bringing Wiz into Angular, merging Wiz and Angular is going to give us better and better reactivity in Angular. The downside to better reactivity, and a lot of this stuff you don't need to know a lot about, because you can still write the easy Angular if you want, right? Like the stuff that everybody wrote in the past. And I actually find signals and stuff to be easier, but that's because I've been working with it for a while and I understand it. But when you start getting into reactivity, you're into definitely a more advanced concept of web, right? Like if we take a look at the different layers of web, um, um, let's just draw this here, right? So like if we talk about the different layers of web, right? Um, tier 0 is just pure HTML / CSS, right? And maybe some post for interactivity, right? That's like the lowest level. The next level up from this is going to be, you know, your XHRF stuff, right? And maybe um, some dynamic JavaScript, right? That's the next level of reactivity. From there, our next level of reactivity is going to be a lot of the modern frameworks, right? React, Angular, Vue, etc. Right? That's your next level of reactivity from, like, when you're doing XHRF and dynamic JavaScript, you could probably in this you could probably put things like jQuery, right? So this is just pure HTML CSS with posts. This is now you're adding in XHRF and dynamic JavaScript, probably jQuery. The next level up of reactivity is like the modern frameworks, Angular, React, and Vue. And then the next layer up from that is where you're getting into like streaming JS and stuff like that. And this is where we get into things like Wiz. What's the framework that Mishko and Shai Resnick are working on? Man, it's not top of mind right now. But there are other frameworks out there that are doing streaming. Angular is moving out of this into this. And the thing is that as we go from here, like when we talk about pure HTML and CSS with just posts to the server, there's not a whole lot of reactivity or interactivity here, right? We might have a form, we might have a button, right? When we get into like the jQuery area, we might be like adding DOM content dynamically, right? We're making JSON requests and things like that. When we get to here, now we start talking about component modularity. We start talking about routing. We start talking about spas. Maybe we're talking about server-side rendering, right? So like the complexity goes up as we go up. When we get into streaming JS, we're even further along in the reactivity. And now we're really talking about like signals and things like that, controlling what part of the DOM updates. And it's just a much more complicated place to be. So yeah. I'm not ignoring your question, Abradores, right? When going one step at a time, I always ask myself, can someone else work on this, not realize there are more steps and do something that introduces frictions to the step-by-step process? And that's another important thing, right? Like, are there ways to parallelize steps? Are there ways, like, that's the important part of an engineering leader. Um, and when I'm talking engineering leader, I'm talking anybody from senior dev on up, right? Junior and mid-level devs, I really expect them to just be like, you work on this step, right? And they need to have a strong enough understanding of working on this step that they can get this step accomplished. But I don't really expect junior or mid-level devs to be like, well, wait, why am I doing this step, right? If they do that, that's a bonus. And that shows strong leadership qualities, and they're on probably a fast track to becoming a leader, a senior dev, a team lead, something like that, right? But really, junior and mid-level devs, I just expect them to be like, yeah, I got my Jira ticket, I got, this is what I'm working on, I'll get this step done. Oh, my next step, okay, great, my next step, right? But if you want to move out of the junior to mid-level, you need to be thinking about the stuff that Halternet's bringing up, and be thinking about the overall impact of the decisions you're making, and what are the risks, what are the costs, what resources do you have, right? Like the team skills, final solution benefits. These are you kind of taking inventory of what you have. And it may be possible for you to skip this step because your team is so strong. Even though there are risks and costs associated with doing it, your team may, right? The resources that you have may allow you to do that. And I think Halternet's speaking to that about the benefits of skipping and stuff like that, right? One of my absolute favorite characters in Cyberpunk 2077 is oh man, Pan Am. And the reason I like Pan Am is a freaking engineer. She looks at everything through the eyes of an engineer. And one of my favorite statements from her is when you're planning the job against Arasaka, and I don't want to spoil too much, right? Because I don't know who's played Cyberpunk 2077 or not. But you've barely met Pan Am. You're talking about the Arasaka job, and you're sitting there talking, and your character asks Pan Am, how do you come up with this stuff? And Pan Am gives one of the greatest discussions about what it means to be an engineering leader or, an architect or things like that. And her answer to that question, and I'm paraphrasing horribly here, right? But I always remember her answer to this question because she says, I look at what I've got, I look at where I'm going, and I look at how what I've got will take me to where I'm going. And if I can't get to where I'm going with what I've got, I need to take a look at what can I get to help me get to where I'm going, right? That's me paraphrasing a whole bunch of that conversation. I love that conversation because it's very much what we do in our day-to-day jobs, right? We look at what we've got. We look at where we're going. We look at how can we get to where we're going with what we've got. If we can't get to where we're going with what we've got, what tools can we introduce to get to where we need to go, right? That's very much this discussion here. And it's a very important part. I'm going to tell you right now that the code writing, and I've said this probably every time since LLMs have become really big, right? The code writing is not your value. Your value is in understanding how do we get to where we're going. Your value is being able to analyze where we're going and say, hey, we're maybe off course going there. can we course correct and maybe do something different, right? Those are your values. As modern engineers and developers, LLMs have taken a lot of the code writing, a lot of the code craftsmanship. I'll tell you right now, I went to lunch on Friday with some old coworkers, and one of my coworkers told me that the company that they're at has introduced a new initiative, and that new initiative is no code will be written by humans. They want every piece of code that's written in their code base to be done by LLMs. And if the LLM gets it wrong, they want the humans updating the LLM with how to do it properly, but they want the LLM writing all code. That was a fascinating discussion. And I plan on continuing that discussion with my friend because I really want to see where that goes. In my mind, that's a dangerous proposition. In their mind, it makes a lot of sense. I want to know if I need to update my position to be more aligned with their position, because maybe things are far enough along that makes 100%, sense. I don't know. And that's the weird thing about where we are. I think our curiosity and our ability to communicate are far more important in today's day and age than being able to churn out code. If all you do is churn out code, you're probably going to be replaced, and that's the sad reality of where we are. So yeah. Alternate, I disagree with the statement that Angular is getting more complicated. The fact that it challenges your mental model about applications and design is actually a good thing. I tend to agree with you there, Alternate. I don't think Angular's gotten more complicated. It does challenge preconceptions, but it's also trying to solve some much more complicated problems. So our language and our mental models need to be updated to understand those problems. You need to understand the problems. Yep, I totally agree with that one, Alternate. Handling front-end state without reactivity feels so verbose and wasteful. Subscribing to set a value is simple to grasp as a starter, but it's so cumbersome if you know the basics of reactivity primitives. That's totally correct, Michael. And that's the other piece, right? Like, signals are a reactivity primitive. RxJS, and here's the thing. I am not against RxJS. In fact, the observable will be coming to ECMAScript. It's coming to JavaScript. There will be an observable native to JavaScript that will do most, if not all, of what RxJS does. In that case, we've got a reactivity built into JavaScript itself through observables. Observables are really just the observer pattern with a lot of the boilerplate of you creating your own observer pattern taken out, and they provide you ways to modify observable streams. That's really all observables are. It's just the observer pattern. Angular's dropped Zone.js and now will not require opting into on push. So those layers of Angular specifics are going away by default. And that's correct, Michael. Things are changing, but they haven't changed yet. And this is the tough thing about modern interviews. And it may depend on where you're interviewing, but I think there's a lot more gotchas just from the stuff that I've been reading online from people who have been interviewing and observing interviews and talking to people who I know who are interviewing. There seem to be more gotchas where people are like, they're looking for a reason not to hire you because I don't know why, right? But I agree with you, Michael. They're going away, but they haven't gone away yet. And if you get into a pedantic discussion, it's good to know that they haven't gone away yet, but they will go away in the future. That's a good call out. Quick, thank you. Thank you, Quick. That is the one that I was thinking about here. Yeah, Quick is the Pan Am because of her such Okay. I like her too. I was very distracted by the scene in the tank. Can you talk about what affected your philosophy? I agree with what you said about LLM. That is basically how I work with Claude Code. And the man, we had a big philosophical discussion. There were a few of us at lunch on Friday, um, and when my one friend brought up that their company is doing that, a lot of us at the table reacted like, you can't take the human out of that equation, right? Um, you need the human to validate that the LLM hasn't hallucinated and stuff. Um, but they seem to believe that that was possible, and that's like when they start under like when a company starts thinking that, my my first instinct is to pick it apart, right? Because I disagree with it. And I think a lot of humans are that way too, right? Like we disagree with something, so we want to pick it apart. And so that's when I have to step back from, what my little lizard brain is telling me, oh, pick this apart, you hate it, rah, 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 right? I have to step back from my lizard brain and allow curiosity to take over. At that point, once I understand that, hey, he's seeing things differently than I am, now I need to start asking questions so that I can understand why his perspective is different. I often talk about, the perspective of developers as I'm working with people, as we do things. And one of the interesting things, right, is let's say, I live in a valley. And so if you look at the area where I live, there's mountains to the east, and there's mountains to the west. And then, there's a river that runs through the center of the valley, right, where I live. So when I talk about perspective, your perspective may be from up here on top of the mountain looking down, and you see a lot of the bigger picture, right? My perspective may be down here closer to the river. And so I get a lot of more detail about the river, and I can tell you more about, maybe what animals live in this area, and, are there fish in the river, and what plants are growing and stuff like that. You from up here, you can tell me, hey, there's a river, there's green, there's another mountain over here. And for me, I can see, hey, there's a mountain over here, there's a mountain over here. But you can also see the other side of this mountain, right? Like your perspective is entirely different. And this is the important thing about just understanding modern development, right? And maybe there's another person who, they're up here and they're getting a different view from even me, right? Like they're seeing the other side of the river. They're getting a different view from you. Like for you, it's probably difficult for you to see certain parts of the mountain, which they can see. You can see parts of the mountain they can't see. They can see the other side of the mountain that neither you nor I can see, right? So the perspective is very, very important, when we're talking about concepts, especially in modern development. And so, it's very, very easy for me to attack you because you don't understand that there are fish in the river, and that, that there's trout and there's chubs and who knows what. And you don't understand that, hey, there's a rock right here, and right, like you can't see that from your perch. So I'm so much better. But again, from your perch, you can see the entire valley, and you can see, stuff that I have no opportunity to see. And right. And so that's where, when my lizard brain wants to kick in and be like, you don't understand the river, rah, 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 all you see is from your perch on the mountain. That's my lizard brain just being like, they don't understand. You need to make sure they understand. And the only way to make them understand is by arguing them into understanding. It's good to step back and just be like, why? right? Well, I can see, that I can see that maybe there's a flash flood coming that you can't see because of your position. You need to get to higher ground. Or, I can see that, maybe there's a fire or who knows what, that stuff that I can't see yet because maybe I haven't seen the smoke, maybe I haven't smelled it, who knows, right? And down here, I can see that, hey, there's the water's poisoned or who knows what, right? So understanding the perspectives is important. It's just hopeless for new people. I don't think it's hopeless. Um, I think I think the stakes have changed. And one of the fascinating things is to go back and read like the old Stoics, because Marcus Aurelius talks about how the elders always talk about the degeneracy of the newer generation or how the newer generation can't learn or all of this stuff. I don't believe it's hopeless. What I do think is that based on my understanding of time, it would be difficult for me, right? It might be hopeless for me, but it's not hopeless for somebody else who's coming into it. Their challenges will be different than mine, and my advice may not be as useful to them as it would have been to me when I was at the same stage. But I don't believe it's hopeless. I'm not really a nihilist, even though I am Gen X, and we're typically nihilists. But with regards to like engineering and stuff like that, I don't believe it's hopeless. I believe there's a lot of opportunity. I think the opportunities have shifted. I think the skills that you needed to know even a year ago are completely different than what I would suggest you need to know now. And that's largely due to just the rapidly shifting face of everything. But to go, a bit deeper into that, I just saw something today. The Thomas Trajan just posted. There was an article written that 2 years ago, your $200 subscription to Claude actually included $2,000 of CPU compute. Today, your $200 subscription to Claude includes a $5,000, I think that was $5,000 CPU compute. So the difference has grown. Claude is having to cover $4,800, whereas in the past they were only covering $1,800. And that's not unique to Claude. OpenAI, Grok, they're all having ChatGPT. It costs way more to run these than people are willing to pay for the service. And so they're having to subsidize the cost. At some point, that bubble's going to have to pop, and those costs are going to have to come due. That's where you get like weird discussions where, you have Trump saying the AIs are going to be getting AI data centers are going to be getting the electricity that they need, but it's not going to raise the cost for the American people. I don't know how that makes sense, right? That's a very American centric example, but again, it's something very AI related. So yeah, I don't believe it's hopeless. For me right now, I do not want to work with juniors because they're just such a net negative in a world where the basic coding can be done with LLM. And then I take more architectural or code review decisions. It's just so much easier. I understand the frustration, but the reality that we have to look at is right now a lot of tech is run by my generation, Gen X, right? And the last Gen Xers were born in 1980. So that means that the youngest Gen Xers are around 47, 46, 2026, 46 years old, right? That means we've probably got like 20 years of strong Gen X influence, and that's probably optimistic, right? As cognitive decline kicks in and things like that, who knows how much time we've got. We need people who can come in and pick up that, right? Because we're very, very top heavy. We have a ton of talent at the top, but we aren't bringing in that flow of talent at the bottom that can take over. And I think that's another big driving piece to the LLMs, that a lot of these companies are recognizing we were idiots. We only wanted to hire seniors, so all we've got is seniors and above. We haven't been bringing up the juniors. What do? Oh, hey, this magic piece of technology can do what a junior can do, but not really. So we're going to throw a ton of money at this, right? Trying to hopefully solve the problem. But the reality is that a brain drain's coming, right? A lot of the people that run these tech companies are going to be retiring. And when they retire, what do? And so I understand the frustration that you've got, but the reality is we were all juniors at one point. We need to be raising that next generation of developers and teaching them to take over for us, right? I don't want to be irreplaceable. If I'm irreplaceable, I'm not promotable. If I'm not promotable, then I'm going to be stuck doing what I'm doing now. And if I hate what I'm doing now, then I'm going to hate my life until I retire. If I make myself replaceable and I teach people to replace me, that allows my knowledge to be transferred to other places. But the only way we can do that is by taking juniors and turning them into seniors. And that's been the reality forever. And companies just don't want to acknowledge that fact. They think that one of the biggest problems I think we have as engineers is it's the, when you have a hammer, everything's a nail. As engineers, everything can be solved with engineering, right? And that's quite often not the case. Quite often, there's a reality that some things need to be solved culturally. Some things need to be solved socially. Some things need to be solved psychologically. Just because we know how to solve things with engineering doesn't mean engineering's the right solution. Yeah. Think about Star Trek and how LaForge did engineering. I love Geordi LaForge. I grew up with Geordi LaForge. When I got home from school, Star Trek The Next Generation was on TV. And so I would run home from school so I could watch Star Trek The Next Generation. So I could watch LaForge and Picard and, Worf and, just all of, Riker, all of the Next Generation crew. And yeah, LaForge was very much the same way. He was good at engineering. Yeah, Michael, I get that with respect to juniors, despite not working with any, but I started as a junior at the place I am now, and now I am the front end lead, keeping my more senior coworkers with best practices. Exactly. Definitely a long-term investment if they don't jump around. Read the comment I wrote before that. I used to be a junior and I had a hard time, but honestly, I now wonder why would people ever hire junior developers when they have AI now? And the reason you should hire AI developers, and I think I touched on this, right? Or why you should hire juniors when you have AI, is AI still hallucinates. One of the things that I want to touch on, and this is coming in the near future, is building MCPs using TypeScript. And the reason that I think building MCPs using TypeScript is going to be important is ArcSiv just released a paper last week or the week before talking about how single context files are not good enough for modern code bases. Your LLM needs basically just-in-time context. MCPs are the ways to provide context that doesn't degrade over time to your LLMs. One of the biggest problems with LLMs, and one of the funniest things, is that you have to restart your LLM every so often because the context can get so corrupted that the likelihood of hallucination goes up the longer that you talk with your LLMs, right? It's just a reality. The context drifts, and right, the amount that's stored in memory, it becomes more and more likely that you get hallucinations. And that's where the human factor comes in, is how do we control hallucinations? How do we get, how do we get predictable patterns out of LLMs and things like that? Those are important questions to ask. And people who can answer those questions are going to make a name for themselves. Yeah. Yeah, of any level. I mean, companies right now really, to them, LLMs are a magic bullet. And it really comes down to a misunderstanding of what they can do. Just because you can type in a prompt and say, make a picture of a car parked at a flying castle in the clouds, and an LLM can generate that, doesn't mean that an LLM can do anything, right? The LLM knows what a picture like a castle looks like, knows what clouds look like, it knows what a car looks like, it knows, like, all this stuff that you ask for, it knows what they look like, and it puts them together in a way that you're like, oh, this is amazing, right? But as soon as you're like, generate a completely unique alien that's never been seen before, LLMs can't do that. They don't have that ability. Or as soon as you go to Claude and you're like, I've got this great new idea that nobody's ever done before, help me build it. Well, Claude's just going to fall back on the stuff that it's seen before, right? That's the problem with LLMs. They can't generate stuff they haven't seen before. And that's the benefit of humans. Look at LinkedIn, there are thousands of applicants for every job. And that is sad. Like the sheer number of layoffs and things. You're totally correct, Obradores. There's just thousands. To add to your point on why we need juniors, let's borrow the Kantian term, categorical imperative. If you only work with seniors and LLMs, then eventually seniors will just extinct. Exactly. That's totally true, you alternate. And only LLMs will remain. So since seniors or LLMs can't become a universal law because it will mutate to only LLMs eventually, then we shouldn't do that. I actually really like that that line of reasoning. It's not something that I thought about before, but I really, really like that line of reasoning. Yeah, we can't do only LLMs, which means that if seniors are a shrinking population, we have to replace seniors. I love that line of reasoning. Anyway, we're a bit, and it's time for me to end. Doing stuff with my family today. So thank you guys for the comments here at the end. We did get some code written. I do want to test it. You know what? Let's finish this up before we do. So we put the mutation back, but what we aren't handling are the sort direction and the feathers filtered. So let's get that. Let's get that handled. We're using mutations for now. I'm not sure that mutations are the right answer, but they're the right answer for now based on where we are on the steps and what we can get done. So what we want to do is with is it initial? Is it on? What am I thinking of? Basically, what we need is we need an effect that's going to watch the sort direction and the feathers filtered. And I'm drawing a blank on the SignalStore. I thought it was on init or with initialization or well, you know what? What is the method in SignalStore to add initialization? I want to add effects to handle loading dynos on certain changes. Hey Ole, it's scary how many juniors are selling themselves as seniors. They have to. Have a good one. With hooks. With hooks. Yes, yes. Why are you telling me to use untracked? Oh, don't tell me to use untracked. That's horrible. Yeah, with hooks. Yes, this is exactly the code that I wanted to write here. Right here. So let's take this code and let's paste it. And let's bring in our with hooks. And we need to bring in our effect. And so it basically picked up that, hey, I'm not doing sort direction or has feathers. So it adds effect. This is interesting. So it's reading the effect. One thing I would do here is I would do const sort direction and that. And let's just console log them. And let's just say sort direction or has feathers changed. Right. So that should handle the issue. Thank you, Michael, for that. I'm not using with hooks if store is provided in root. Yeah, that's an interesting one too. If you're providing the store in the root, setting up the with hooks might not be a good way to go. And you might want to add a method to initialize, right? Because you may want to control when that initialization takes place. For us, we're injecting this. We're injecting this at a lower level. We're injecting this at the component level. So I think we're okay. So our with hooks is fine here. Our Dynos CRUD service, we can close that. Our implementation. So it even told me to use with hooks if I just looked. So let's go really, really quick and let's replace the Dyno CRUD store service with the Dyno CRUD store. And see if we can get this to run really quick. Because this will set us up to go to Signal Forms next week. So let's see how quickly we can get through this. So the first thing we want to do is we're just going to remove the Dyno CRUD store service. Let's go ahead and delete this. There we go. So that fixes that. And then the next thing it says is we need to modify the home component. So let's go ahead and modify the home component. Home component. So inside of here, we are going to take this out. And instead, we are going to inject our Dynos CRUD store. Oh, is it not picking it up? CRUD store. So let's pull that in. Wait, why is it not? So we're exporting this here. Do I not have it in an index file? Is that my problem? So there's my store. Index.ts. Yeah, that's the problem. So here we're just going to export star from ./lib/store/dinoscrudstore. So there's that piece. And then now we should be able to go back to our home component. It should be able to find it. Why doesn't it like this? Okay, so we've got a circular dependency. We're probably going to need to clean that up. DinoStore. This is now Dino's CRUD store. Boom. And the value here is DinoStore.has feathers filter. Why doesn't it like that? Which is possibly undefined. Oh. Oh. See, I don't like this. You know what? We'll clean this up. We'll clean this up next time. So here the method here is dot oops. Yeah, we'll clean this up next time. Filter has feathers. So on our store, actually we can update has feathers filter. That one we can fix here. Yeah, we're gonna, so we've already discovered some bugs that were in place because we were using the component store and the typing wasn't as good. We're going to need to fix these up, but we'll do that next time. I definitely need to end, go get ready to go hang out with my family. You guys have a great rest of your weekend. And we'll see you next week when we're going to start getting into signal forms. But yeah, we'll talk to you next time. Thank you guys all for the great discussion, and